Welcome to my ultimate Plague Herald guide. The Plague Herald is essentially a horde of insects within a cloak, and it's a complicated class. It's also a very strong class though, and it's actually a pretty fun class too. So in this guide, I go deep because I think a lot of players have a hard time deciding what cards are better. Let's take Grim Bargain for example, a level 8 card. Hopefully you can see this. These are my notes on level 8. Never have I had such extensive notes for a class because there's a bunch of complicated card interactions and I think it's really difficult to figure out which is actually the best. So I'm going to make sure I walk you through all of that. We're going to look at every level 1 and X card. We're going to talk about card picks from 2 to 9 and synergies and what makes sense. You know, should you take Grim Bargain? Should you not take Grim Bargain? And hopefully you're going to find it really interesting. And so super complicated, but also really fun. It's one of my 4 funnest classes because it has so much complexity, because it has so many good build paths. So I'm going to put a link down to a video I've created. It's the 4 funnest classes in Gloomhaven. Go ahead, check that out after you watch this video, and let's get started with level 1 and X cards. Grasping Vermin. And right away, we've got some interesting choices. So let's start with the top. The top is just a very strong crowd control. You're going to be able to immobilize melee enemies. You're going to be able to do it often. You're going to be able to do it with a lot of range, and you're going to be able to do it, you know, against a lot of enemies. This is a very powerful crowd control top. The initiative, I'm not saying anything. I am a child. The bottom though, this is one of these actions that is part of multiple viable build paths. This is probably the least viable, which is to kind of tank and do some other stuff. I would recommend you don't play this bottom unless you're very experienced and you're theory crafting, you know, an alternate build. I think losing a range is going to impact you a lot. It's going to impact how effective you are. And I think, you know, playing a standard Plague Herald build, you're not very often going to be getting hit, so the shield doesn't matter that much. Biting Gnats. Pretty straightforward card. Top is going to be really solid. It'll get you probably into mid levels before it starts to, you know, lose steam and you're like, I don't know if I really want this anymore. But at level 1, it's a very good, strong card. The initiative sucks. And that's a common theme with the Plague Herald. There are a lot of poor initiatives and you're really going to have to work with that. We'll get more into that later. Bottom move 4, just going to be very useful for us. But, you know, usually I think we're probably going to want to play it for the top. Foul Wind. The top is okay, but it's actually really hard for us to play. Until level 3, we have no non-loss cards that produce air. So unless you have another way, it's going to be pretty hard to use all 6 of these charges, and you're really going to have to set up with your losses and stuff like that, and it's just a massive pain. And then once you do get to level 3, with fetid flurry, you're never going to want to play this bottom. Very rarely anyways. You're mostly going to want to play this top because fetid flurry top is, I mean, it's a really good, solid card that will just always be useful for you. So I recommend not taking this card. The bottom is also not that good. Loot 1, with how much we have to be in range, with us being squishy, unless you're playing some alternate build, you're not going to be in a good position to loot, and you have no top moves. Leave this card at home almost all the time. Scattered Terror. Top is not bad in certain circumstances, but it could really use something like Foul Wind top, which you're probably not going to take. It doesn't scale that well. In best case scenario, you've got 3 enemies that have 2 shield, and this is worth 12 damage. So, I mean, sometimes it can be pretty decent. Why you want this card, though, is the initiative. This is our best initiative, period. And I took this card a lot, literally just for that initiative, because sometimes you need to go first. And then the bottom, I mean, it's okay. You're not going to have a use for it a lot. A lot of times this is going to be a move 2. You're going to basic action move 2, and you're going to play some sort of top attack or something along those lines, and you're just going to want to go first, and that's why you're going to use this card. Blistering Vortex. Top is pretty underwhelming compared to something like the Tinker's Ink Bomb at level 1. That's a starting class. It's not nearly as good. The initiative, though, is pretty good for us. The bottom move 2 is with a shield it's like slightly better than a move 2. Just slightly, because again, we're not going to be in range very often. A lot of the damage you take as the Plague Herald is, you doing it to yourself. If you're playing it kind of the standard way, you don't get hit very often. So unless you're theory crafting a build, this one you pretty much bring for the initiative, or you don't bring it at all. Winged Congregation. Top is actually a pretty powerful ability. I think you can use it sometimes based upon the scenario. Like if it's a scenario full of hazardous and difficult terrain and there's traps everywhere, or there's a lot of bottlenecks and you need to get to an objective, this card can actually be extremely useful. Flying is actually very powerful, so don't sleep on this. Sometimes this top is really going to be useful. The initiative for us is great. 16 is just yeehaw, it's really good. And then the bottom, the move to heal 1 affect all adjacent allies. This is what you're going to play it for most of the time. Yeah, because you're going to be able to move next to your allies and remove poison or wound from them. And whether you've poisoned them yourself, because the Plague Herald's a bit of a jerk that way. And just to be clear, the poisoning your allies build is not really super effective. I would mostly stay away from that, especially if you're really new. But, being able to move and heal all adjacent allies is going to be really nice for when you do accidentally poison them, or the monsters, poison or wound them. So this card is really good. Make sure you're always taking it with you, especially at low levels. I hope you're liking the video so far. If you are, please go ahead and hit the like button. It really helps me out a lot. And subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. That's the little bell, so that when I publish content, you're notified. And also, I work with Noble Knight Games. They've got a crazy selection of games. They have the largest selection of games in the world. They've got out-of-print stuff. They've got rare stuff. They've got everything you're looking for, whether it's old Magic cards or D&D, board games, accessories for those types of things. They've got it all. And I've got a link down in the description. If you click on the link and you go and buy something from them, it supports my channel. And I really need your support to, help this channel continue to grow. So thank you so much, and let's get on to the next cards. Spread the Plague. And top is another, action where you can poison your friends and really annoy them. And the payoff in this case is not bad. But the payoff for poisoning your allies in general is not really there compared to the other things you can do with the Plague Herald. If you do decide to use this, just make sure you've got, some bottom heals, right? We just talked about the bottom of Winged Congregation. That heal is really good for, getting rid of some of this stuff. And there's a couple other ranged heals that do low amounts of healing but are great for removing poison. So if you do take this, make sure you've got those. Initiative at 27 is pretty darn good for us. It's going to be one of the cards we really like to use. The bottom, though, is awesome. A range 3, attack 3 for this class is amazing on the bottom. Combine it with a top attack and you get to burst damage. So take this card always and take it for the initiative and that bottom attack. Wretched Swarm. Wow. You can stun a lot of monsters with this card. You're going to use this card pretty much every scenario. When it really makes sense, you can get 3, 4, 5 monsters. I mean, that's ridiculous to do some damage at range 3 with that kind of area, and a stun is a very powerful card. Like, you can probably take this card all the way through to level 9. Initiative, it does suck, but sometimes it's okay to open a door and have someone, another ally open the door and let the monsters kind of bunch up a little bit, and then you roll in late and just stun everybody, and then your friends go in and yeehaw, slaughter time. Bottom move 4 is also very good for this class, and I just love this card because there's nothing better than having a great, powerful situational loss on half of the card, and then a great, repeatable, spammable discard on the other half. Because you get to use the great discard until you want to play that powerful loss, and the card's just amazing. So I love this card, always taking it. Gathering Doom. Top is just a very good, solid attack. It fits right in with our primary objective of cursing monsters. You get to do some damage. But remember, if you kill the monster, the curse does not go into the monster deck. So there's a little bit of anti-synergy when you've got, high attack values and curse. So this is great for softening monsters up, which is actually a bit tough because our initiative sucks so much. So this is why sometimes you want to pair with a low initiative bottom so that you can get this off, soften up a monster, let your friends kill, then the curse stays in the deck. The bottom loot 2 is amazing for late game scenarios. Loot 2 is so much better than loot 1. In loot 1, you get to loot 6 hexes around you. Loot 2, you loot an additional 12. So it's 18 hexes looted versus 6. Loot 2 versus loot 1. That's why it's so much better, and it's totally worth it, even though it's a loss. Epidemic. Top is very powerful for level 1. Very rare to get, 6 damage out of a repeatable top, and it gives you an experience. The range is going to be a bit of a pain, and in certain party compositions you may have trouble using this, but still overall a very strong level 1 card. And then the initiative is, it's Plague Herald initiative. The bottom, this is mostly just going to be annoying unless you're playing a fringe build. I wouldn't use it for the bottom very often. I would use it for this great top though. Virulent Strain. Top is okay. Sometimes it's going to be useful against shielded enemies. Generally it's below the curve though, because you've got to put a condition on a monster, and then you want poison to stay on the monster so you can kill them. But, to do this damage, you've got to remove the poison. So it's, slightly below the curve, but very useful in certain situations. It's kind of like almost a pierce or something. Initiative is the worst it can be. Flip a coin, you never know what's going to happen at 50 initiative. And then the bottom, you don't really need this. You don't really need this card because you've got cards like Vile Pestilence that are going to be able to poison a lot of enemies. And so this card, only take it if you see a lot of shielded enemies. And even then, sometimes you don't need it. And most of the time, you're probably going to leave this card in the sideboard. Creeping Curse, another very solid card at level 1. Just like Gathering Doom, you're going to be able to attack 3, range 3, and curse. Very good. Initiative is late, but not quite late enough. The bottom is okay. Move 2, curse, target 1 adjacent enemy. If you're going really late and you have a plan, you can get this off. So you can move in late and curse, and then the next turn, you're going to need to go quick and move away and do whatever you need to do so that you're not the focus of the monsters. So I think, 90% of the time you're probably using this for the top, but the bottom can be situationally useful as well. Vile Pestilence. A very good level 1 card. Really easy to use because of how big the area of effect is. Try not to poison too many of your friends, but don't let that stop you. They're going to have to work with you. You are just a crazy bunch of insects in a cloak, so I don't know. They can't expect you to feel too bad, right? And insects don't have a conscience, do they? Okay, I need to move on. Initiative 61 is terrible. The move 3 bottom, also very good, but I think you're probably going to use this for the top most of the time. Paralyzing Bite. Top is just very solid. Really nice to be able to do a little damage at range, repeatable, and stun, and get experience. Even up into later levels, you're probably going to find yourself using this card. Initiative is pretty decent for us too. It gives us an okay chance of going first. And then the bottom move 6 jump. This is just a late game, I want to try and steal a treasure before the scoundrel gets there or something like that. Or it can get you to an objective. Overall, great card, right? Repeatable half, powerful loss on the other half. Very, very good card. Pairs well with Grim Bargain too. Like Grim Bargain, this card becomes ridiculous. At level 2, we have Under the Skin and we have Rot Maggots. Under the Skin top is pretty decent against shielded enemies with a shield 2. This is basically an attack 5 repeatable, so pretty strong and gives you an XP. Bottom move 4 is very solid. Rot Maggots, the top is powerful, but it's quite a pain. Like I was saying before, at range 2, it can be quite annoying. And because this poisons your allies, very often you are going to be poisoning your allies because you need to be within range 2. And, essentially they're going to be here and you're going to be here, monster here, and you're going to poison them a lot. So it's actually a pain. And then the initiative at 69, again, is 69? I don't know what's going on with this class. The bottom heal 2 is quite good. Heal 2 at range 3 to 2 targets, just very flexible for removing poison and doing what you need to do. I love me a bottom heal so that you can attack on top. That being said, I'm taking Under the Skin almost every time because Vile Pestilence and Biting Gnats are both really good tops attached to very good move bottoms. And so we need to add another card that has a good move so that, when we're facing shielded enemies, we play Under the Skin. When we're facing non-shielded enemies, we can play Biting Gnats. And so we need some flexibility to have a move that's coupled with a strong attack. So I'm taking Under the Skin most of the time just to solve some of those move issues, because very often you're not going to want to waste Biting Gnats or Vile Pestilence bottom move. At level 3, we have Fetid Flurry, and we have Succumb to the Gift. Fetid Flurry top is just really solid. It's an upgrade on Gathering Doom and Creeping Curse. Just a very good solid card. Initiative is great. The bottom move 2 and produce air, empower air, is going to be pretty useful for us. There's a bunch of cards later on, right? Like Airborne Toxin, Mass Extinction, Storm Wings, some others. Willing Sacrifice, yeah. And then we've got Succumb to the Gift. This right here, it used to be normal and elite enemies, and that made it a lot better. This card is no good at lower levels. Killing a low-level monster with 8 or 10 hit points is nowhere as good as using this card at much higher levels and killing something with 20 or 25 hit points. So it scales really well, but it sucks early on. And you've got to apply poison first, which for you isn't super hard, but still, it's just another condition. The monster, if you have to do it and then play this card, the monster lives 2 turns instead of dying the first turn. If an ally can poison it and then you can combo it in, obviously a lot better, but just not that good. And the problem is with this card, we've got a situational top we may use early. We may have to wait till late, right? Depending on the scenario. And then the bottom is just going to be a pain. You're not going to want to use this all the time. Sometimes you want to have poisoned allies. Sometimes you don't poison your allies. In fact, mostly you don't poison your allies unless you're, being a pain and you're playing somewhat of an alternate build. So you've got this bottom you don't want to use, and then you've got this top that you might not be able to use until much later. So you may be stuck with a basic attack 2 or move 2. Take Fetid Flurry 100% of the time. Unless you're starting a very late level character at like level 8 or 9, then you may be able to take Succumb to the Gift, because at that point the insta-kill is going to be fairly decent. At level 4, we have Nightmarish, Affliction, and we have Storm Wings. Nightmarish Affliction top is just everything we want. We're hitting multiple targets, we're poisoning, we're cursing, we're making dark. I mean, it's everything you want. You're gonna love this top. Initiative at 43 is not great. And then the bottom, though, is also awesome. Immobilizing multiple targets at range 3 is sometimes as good as a stun. If you've got 2 powerful melee monsters, you can immobilize them. You still get to attack because it's a bottom action. And those melee monsters, unless they pull one of their annoying ranged cards, are going to sit there and probably do nothing. So very, very good. Storm Wings, it can be quite powerful, but it's a pain to use. I mean, you've got to produce air, empower air, keep saying produce. You've got to empower air, which is not that hard to do. But then you've got to make sure, everyone's lined up, and it's more powerful than the Spellweaver's Impaling Eruption, but the Spellweaver gets to use Impaling Eruption twice because of Reviving Ether. And so this card is just, it's not quite there. The bottom move 5 is really nice though, and the initiative at 91, nice and slow, which does help us. But I think if you took Under the Skin, you've got plenty of movement, and so you don't need this move 5. I'm taking Nightmarish Affliction 99% of the time, unless you didn't take Under the Skin and you really feel like you need that move. But Nightmarish Affliction just does so much good stuff for us. At level 5, we have Accelerated End, and we have Willing Sacrifice. Accelerated end top is pretty decent, especially when you're consuming dark, but it works a lot better in 4 players. You need to poison a lot of monsters, and then you need to play this when there are a lot of poison monsters for it to be really effective. The bottom is really good though. It has a ton of utility. Range 5 and poisoning 3 targets is just so easy. And because it's a bottom action, you combine with the top, and you can really buff up a top attack. So very good card. The top of Willing Sacrifice, though, is awesome. I mean, it's not that hard to poison monsters, even if you're not specialized into poisoning. You have Nightmarish, Affliction, you have Vile Pestilence. Just those 2 cards alone can keep you with enough poison monsters to pretty much use this top every turn, or every time you move. It's not going to be every turn. This card is going to be worth somewhere in the range of 21 to 30 damage on average based upon my calculations. Sometimes you can get more, but sometimes you don't want to move with your bottom action. And if an ally grants you a move, this only procs when it says grant you a move action. This little symbol up here, that's the class that I know it works with. I haven't checked every single class, but I know it works with this class. No more spoilers than that. The bottom of this card, it's okay, but I think if you're playing this card, you're playing it for the top 99% of the time. At level 6, we have Stinging Cloud and we have Black Tides. Stinging Cloud top is just a powerful, non-loss AoE. If you're hitting poison monsters, you can easily get into the 12 damage range here. And if you've got Dark to consume, you can muddle everyone. Pretty solid for a repeatable attack. Terrible initiative. Bottom move 3, shield 1. It's fine. I mean, move 3 is good. Shield 1 you don't very often need, but once in a while it's going to be handy. And then we've got Black Tides. Black Tides top. For level 6, this is starting to get closer to the weekend. I mean, it's got, it's worse than Fetid Flurry, because Fetid Flurry curses and this creates air. Air can be useful to us, but I'd still take a curse. So it's, objectively worse top versus our level 3 Fetid Flurry. And then initiative 37, it's better than 66. Move 4 bottom and Empower Dark is decent flexibility, but I'm taking Stinging Cloud 100% of the time just because we're built for, AoEs, and if we can add like a minor power potion or something on this and then have poison monsters, we can start out putting some very serious damage with a card like this. At level 7, we have Baneful Hex and we have Airborne Toxin. Baneful Hex top is going to be very, very good. If you're cursing a lot, and you should be prioritizing curse with, a reasonable amount of poison on a standard effective Plague Herald build, this card can easily get about 30 damage, sometimes up in the 50s. And so if you've got to choose between this and Willing Sacrifice, I would play this instead. However, you can play both. You're still going to get 20 plus turns of longevity if you just play these 2 losses and no other losses. So don't be too worried. With our 11 card hand size, we can afford to play 2 persistent losses. And then we've got initiative at 33, and the bottom is actually fairly decent too. A nice opening room move, and it's not going to be super fast, but you play this with Willing Sacrifice. You come out, curse a bunch of monsters, play Willing Sacrifice, minor stam potion, grab this, next turn you play this. By turn 2, you've cursed a bunch of monsters, and you've got Willing Sacrifice and Baneful Hex out. The world's your oyster after that. And then Airborne Toxin. So I haven't bitch too much about the nerfs from first edition to second edition, because it's just, there's no point to it. And this one, it got hit the hardest. When you go from 3 potential range down to 2, you go from I'm going to put a graphic up here. You go from 36 effective hexes down to 18, and so it's a 50% nerf. Now, 36 hexes was overpowered. This card probably should read 4 curse and muddle 4 targets or something like that within range 3. Something along those lines, so that, there could be a middle ground drawn. Now, you pretty much have to consume air to make this useful, and you've got to put yourself in a more vulnerable position, and that can definitely cause you some problems. You've kind of got to put yourself in the middle of the monsters. It's still better than most people think, though. Potentially hitting 18 hexes is still pretty good. You've just got to go throw yourself in the middle of the monsters and have a good plan. So it's still a good card. The bottom can be useful too. I don't think it is as good as the top, even with the nerf, and it's definitely not anywhere near as good as Baneful Hex. So I think most of the time now I'm taking Baneful Hex just because, you know, you can really push your per turn damage up having Baneful Hex out. At level 8, we have Grim Bargain and we have Spreading Scourge. And I showed you in the beginning of the video, this is going to get complicated. I've got a pretty good memory, but just to make sure I cover everything, I am literally going to read from my notes as I do this. So, yeah, I think that's the first time I've ever done that in a video. So, Grim Bargain, the top is very interesting. First off, if there's an ally in range 2, then you have to make sure you're making an effective attack or the charge will be wasted. So, if there is an ally within range 2, you must curse them. And so if you see there's only one monster left and there's an ally within range 2, you may not want to make an attack, or you may want to make sure that you move out of range of your ally before you use the attack. If fringe case, if there's 10 curses already in the player's decks, that would suck. But if you do have 10 curses already, this ability will still work. I went and made sure to check the FAQ just in case, because I'm like, what happens if there's no more curses left for the player deck? Anyways, so when you do add a target, you don't get other effects that can add more targets. So for example, Storm Wings, you'll just get another attack on 2 targets. You won't get extra attacks where you can, you know, run the attack over a line of monsters like the original ability. You only get just another basic attack 4. And then this is a double loss card, and that's a massive pain. However, if you have an uneven hand size, you have no opportunity cost on that until you get to the end of your second rest cycle. So for example, rest cycle 1, you play 5 turns, you have 10 cards in your discard or whatever, and then you have 1 card left over. You can leave this card in your hand, so it's not just a basic move or attack 2. This is a strategy you can use with anyone. Anytime you have, you know, a starting hand size that's odd, you can keep a double loss until the end of your second rest cycle, and you won't have to play it for the basic or the basic attack or move 2. The bottom of this card is not great, but in some situations can add some burst damage. I don't think many people are using it for that though. But remember, it doubles everything, even items, attack modifier cards, etc. So it can be worth a lot if you really plan around it and use power potions. So it's going to double the result of all your bonuses, items, attack modifiers, everything. So if you really plan around it, this card could probably be worth over, 15 damage. So I mean, it's not the end of the world, but I think most people are probably taking this for the top. So let's get into Grim Bargain. Let's math this out here. So let's say your average attack is around 4 or 4.5. Some are lower, some are 4. Then you add in your weak attack modifier deck, which isn't that good. You get around to maybe 4.5 damage, right? That's pretty much where you're at, 4.5 damage. You add 2 targets, so you're adding 9 extra damage. You've got 6 charges, so that means you're adding 54 extra damage. But you won't always have 2 targets to hit. You won't always. You're either going to have to be really smart and position yourself more than 2 away from your ally so you don't waste a charge, or sometimes you're only going to be able to hit 1 or 2 monsters and not always have 3 available targets, because remember, you can't target the same monster twice. So let's say effective wise, you take off a handful of damage at least. Let's say it's only worth, somewhere in the range of 46 to 50 damage. Then you're also cursing your allies. Each curse, if they hit it within their deck, is worth, let's say, 5 damage at this level. And that's probably maybe even a little low. So 6 charges at 5 damage is minus 30 damage overall to your party damage because of the curses in your allies' decks. If you do this, then you're only, let's say you're at 16, 18, 20 damage net effect on damage. And it introduces higher variability into your allies' deck so that when they're attacking monsters, they may miss sometimes and the monster stays alive, and that causes a reasonable amount of problems. Now, if you use this quite late and just go bonkers in the last half of the scenario, the curses in your allies' decks won't matter as much. So it's better to play it a little bit later. And that's why I brought up the point around, your attack or your starting hand size being odd and allowing you to wait until the end of the second rest cycle to play it. This may help you play it later in the scenario so that your allies hit less of the curses. Because if they hit less of the curses, the benefit of this card goes up a lot. Okay, so if you're using this with cards that poison or curse, then you can add so many more curses, or you can poison a lot more, or you can use it to, stun. I can't remember what the level 1 card name is right now. You can use it to stun, and, stunning 3 monsters with a reusable card is going to be very good. So there's a lot of intangibles too around how much more benefit this brings. So damage output, though, if that's your main goal, the damage output on this card is not going to be as good as Willing Sacrifice or Baneful Hex. Both of those cards, in my opinion, will outdamage this card for total party damage because of the effect of the curses on your allies, unless you play this card quite late. But if you do play it really late, you're probably going to have to play it for a move 2 or attack 2, reducing some of your effectiveness. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so I think you can take... Oh, Spreading Scourge. I have to talk about Spreading Scourge. Okay, very good card. Very good top. I'm not going to talk about it a lot. It's just a very solid card. If you're a brand new player, you probably should be playing Spreading Scourge. It's so much simpler, and it's going to be very close in effectiveness, I think. If you play Grim Bargain perfectly, you're probably going to do better than Spreading Scourge, but I doubt if you will unless you're, fairly experienced. So, the bottom, though, is a nice heal. So top, very good attack, hit a lot of monsters. Bottom's a very good heal. It's great for getting rid of poison and wound. So my recommendation would be Baneful Hex and Willing Sacrifice are going to output more damage than Grim Bargain over the course of a scenario for your entire party. F me, this is getting long, but it's so complicated. You have no idea how much time I spent figuring this all out. Like, when you're playing casually, you get to just kind of feel things out, but I dove into this because I wanted to make sure and bring true value to you and give you a really good recommendation. Baneful Hex, Willing Sacrifice, those are going to be better for damage. Spreading Scourge is going to be probably not as good if you play Grim Bargain perfectly, but on average, it's probably going to be better because you're probably not going to play it perfectly, and it creates all kinds of problems for your allies. And so certain party compositions, like if you're playing with somebody who's a heavy hitter that needs to make sure that they hit when they want to hit, you don't want to play Grim Bargain. So I think taking Spreading Scourge in a vacuum is better, but Grim Bargain can do some really cool things. I hope that helped. I hope it wasn't too much. Let me know down in the comments what you think of Grim Bargain. At level 9, we have Mass Extinction and we have Convert the Flock. Mass Extinction top is very powerful. It can be quite annoying to you as well. So some party compositions, this may actually be, almost as much of a pain as his benefit, but you're going to be able to output a lot of curses and you're going to wound the monsters, and you're better at getting rid of wound than monsters are. So, it's quite a powerful top actually. And it produces, multiple elements, produces air, empowers dark. I don't know why. Empower is just so hard for me to say. Bottom is also quite good if you've got, a lot of poison out there. You can really output some serious damage and, great for shielded enemies. Convert the Flock top is just not that great. For a level 9 card, it's not worth it. There's anti-synergy between attacks that do good damage and curse, because if you kill any of them, you curse less. And so this isn't equal to 3 curses on average. Decent amount of time you're going to kill a monster with one of the attacks, and it's only going to be worth 2 curses, right? So just remember that when you're using it, and it's a loss. Initiative, though, at 29 is pretty decent for the class. The bottom, all poison allies suffer 2 damage. For each 2 allies damaged, add +1 to all your attacks this round. Nope, that is no good. That sucks. It really does suck. I mean, it's just, it would be better if it was a persistent effect and you only had to play the card once and then you could use it multiple times throughout a scenario. But I think because you've got to use a bottom action for this, no way. I'm taking mass extinction 100% of the time. All right, let's talk enhancements. And this class needs a ton of enhancements, or enjoys a ton of enhancements. There's so much you can do. I don't want to get caught in recommending 20 different enhancements based upon separate build paths and start talking about card choices, because I think it's just going to get too convoluted. So a couple of basic ones that are cheap. Gathering Doom or Creeping Curse, you can add another curse to that attack line so that it's a double curse. This is going to be really nice for you. And then Nightmarish Affliction, you can add curses to this, add a target, right? So that you're hitting more targets, and you can add a curse. You can, with 2 enhancements, you can put out 6 curses every use of this. That's getting pretty darn expensive, but even if you just enhance it once, you can, be outputting 4 curses each time you use it. For perks, start with removing the -1s. 95% of the time I start with that because it just ruins your plans. Then get rid of the -2 and then add in the 2 curse cards. And why should you do this? Because I think adding the curses helps a lot. We don't attack on advantage a lot, and so rolling modifiers aren't quite as bad for the Plague Herald as other classes. We do a lot of reusable AoE low damage attacks with a lot of targets. And so, missing one of those, rolling into a miss on one of those is not a big problem. It would be much more of a problem on like a big, loss attack. We don't have a lot of big loss attacks. And so it's not as bad for us. Next, add in the 2 stun cards and then take the ignore negative scenario effects. And from that, do whatever you want. These items are going to be for Prosperity 2. So spoilers for Prosperity 2 if you haven't got there. 99% chance you have. But I like to take the Cloak of Pockets so I can have a bunch of potions. I like to have, a minor mana potion for this class so that you can have flexibility. I like to have a power potion, and I like to have a ton of small items to buff up the AoE attacks and do some different useful things. I think the Cloak of Pockets is the best chest choice for this class, better than the Cloak of Invisibility in my opinion, because I don't think you put yourself in trouble a lot, and also you take a decent amount of damage, so having healing potions around is going to be really, really useful for you, and I don't think you want to spend any of your other slots for healing, etc. So Cloak of Pockets, take it, trust me. Boots of Speed, this can help you manage your initiatives. Between this and the Boots of Striding, I think it's pretty even, but I just want to talk about the Boots of Speed because your initiative sucks so bad. Sometimes you need to go first. You do. You need to go first. Your allies are going to rock a bunch of AoEs too, and you want to poison a group of 5 monsters first so that your friends can just AoE on these guys and do a ton of damage. You need to go first. I liked playing the Boots of Speed better than the Boots of Striding, and then of course, take your minor stam, etc. I hope you liked the video. I want you to comment on level 8 and let me know what you thought of that level. I don't think I've ever talked as long about a single level of cards as I did there, so I'm kind of curious what people think, whether it was too much detail or, whether I rambled too much. So thanks so much for watching the video.